Hello, everybody, and I'd like to thank everybody, first of all, for tuning into my presentation here. I am Bryan Easterday, and I am a husband, a father, a Vedic astrologer, and many of you will also know me as a co-creator of the Wizard Factory podcast, which is probably where most of you will be familiar with me at, that I do with my dear friend Logan Hart. I also want to start by thanking off Brandon Martin and everybody at the Cubbyhole Network for putting on this conference. I was very excited whenever Brandon sent me a message asking me if I wanted to do a presentation. So I definitely wanted to bring something exciting to you guys. And for me, the subject that I am most passionate about, easily, and one of the most useful tools for understanding natural law, cosmic law, which all of the presenters here have such a passion for. Vedic astrology really is the science and the tool that I find most useful for that. So I was really trying to figure out how to set up a presentation that covers such a vast and complex subject in a limited amount of time. So that being said, I made this presentation to kind of work in conjunction with a series that I have on the Wizard Factory YouTube channel that you can find, and you can also find it through the One Great Work Network, called Vedic Astrology and Cosmic Law. And it's an entire playlist, an entire series that I'm making, going through Vedic astrology and different aspects of it and how we can use that to understand cosmic law. And some of the clips I have up on there already were taken from a recent course I taught teaching how to actually go about doing that. So keep that in mind, that this presentation, I am trying to keep it as brief as possible, to cover as much information as possible in a short amount of time. But if this does interest you and you're wanting to look into more, that playlist is made specifically to kind of go along with this presentation. So that being said, let me go ahead and set this up. So my presentation I'm calling Vedic Astrology, Navigating the Universe. And this was something I was kind of thinking about a few weeks ago, of the word universe, and like, really, what is that? What does it encompass? Especially in the context of cosmic law, as we see, with the principle of mentalism, we see that the mind is all. So everything in the universe is included in the mind of the all, and is a part of that. So to really dive into what that is and what that means, I just kind of started following this train of thought that I'm going to lead you guys along with me here. So first, let's look at our terminology. Let's look at what is the universe. On to my next slide here. Okay, so etymology is always a great place to start with when we're wanting to look at the meaning of words, right? So the etymology comes from the Latin unus, meaning one, and then versus, which is the past participle of vertere, which means to turn back, be turned, to convert, to transform, to translate, or to be changed. It's very interesting to think about that. In the Vedic text, some of the things Vishnu says that, he's constantly turning back in on himself. And from the Vedic or the Hindu perspective, the universe, everything is Vishnu, right? And then there's just many different forms or avatars of Vishnu, which we're all a form of Vishnu, if you're looking at it from that perspective. But it's a cycle of turning in on itself. We're the all experiencing itself. Well, in order to do that, you have to have reflection. We have to have an experience and then to reflect. So everybody is a different manifestation, a different fractal of the all, and it's just creating and turning back in on itself. It's this cycle. And the other thing here to look at, is green language. That, sometimes it's very fun to take a word and to just kind of play with it a little bit and see what you come up with. And with universe, I found there was kind of a couple different ways you could break it down phonetically. And each one kind of has its own meaning or connotation here. So first one is just breaking apart uni and then verse. So you could look at that as like the one. You could think of it as inversive, and like with music is the one song, right? It's kind of an interesting way to think about it, because when we're looking at cosmic law, obviously we have the law of vibration. We see that everything is moving. Everything at some level is all part of this one giant song. Then you could look at it as the you and I verse. So it's not just the one song, but it's our song. It's a song that is made of you and I, and every little fractal. We all make up a part of this whole. Then you could think about it, the you in verse. So, where is your place in the song? So as I was thinking about this, I was seeing, just kind of thinking about this theme of music, right? The idea that everything is just a song, everything's vibration, and then tying that back to, natural law. And then in relating that to astrology, I kind of started thinking about how astrology really allows me to become a conscious creator, to then move into more awareness. And that then dawned on me that just in the way, like if we want to take the same theme of music, right? You could think of there being two different kinds of people when it comes to interacting with music, right? You have people that they don't understand music theory or how to play an instrument or anything, and they can enjoy the experience. They could be out in a crowd at a concert and enjoying it, but they're not necessarily contributing to the song. They might be contributing some noise to the atmosphere, right? They're screaming or they're clapping, they're applauding, whatever it may be. Like, we're always creating, but are we consciously creating? But then you have the musicians, right? They're the ones that probably understand music theory, or they at least understand how to play their instrument, at an efficient level in order to create what most people would consider music versus just senseless noise, right? And the difference between those people is what? That knowledge, that awareness of the fundamental laws of how music theory works, how you actually use this instrument to create patterns that people then find enjoyable, versus someone who's just taking it and, just like I said, making a bunch of senseless noise. So that really leads us to seeing that there are two kinds of people. There's those who think they are playing and those who know they are. And if we're thinking about the song called life, if we're thinking of everything as this great song, then we can see that each of us has a responsibility, that we all are creating. But are we unconsciously creating chaos, or are we pretending like we know everything and creating a bunch of chaos because our knowledge is actually based in truth? It's not based on cosmic law. Or there's people, like I said, you can step into the role of knowing at a fundamental level what these laws are, how they actually apply in every single situation in every area of your life, and they are always present and always in effect. Because when you can understand the fundamentals and you make those your foundation, then what you can go and then create and work within that. Just like a musician can understand the fundamentals of music theory. And, they all, you could give a bunch of different musicians the same piano and they're all working within the same thing, but they all come up with creating something very different, right? A different song, a different piece, and they can all be equally as beautiful. That's just like it is with life. Each one of our lives is a song, that when we can start to integrate at a foundational level the knowledge of cosmic law, of how our reality actually works, we can choose to become conscious creators with that. So for me, one of the best ways to that I have discovered to gain self-awareness and also awareness of others is through the science of Vedic astrology. So, as I mentioned with cosmic law, it's best to start with the basics. That sometimes the basics in astrology, like you get down to say the elements. And so I'm going to kind of set this all up. I'll try to make it really, really brief because it's something I can get going on easily enough. But this is a great place to start in order to start seeing how astrology is a really good tool for observing cosmic law. And so we'll get into this here. So first off, to explain, what you see here on the right is known as a North Indian style chart. So in Vedic astrology, there's multiple style charts. Each one has its kind of pros and cons and are used for different things, but the North Indian style is great for beginners. And it is also really good for displaying the concept that I'm trying to show here. So with this style of chart, this very first box up here in the center where I have it saying fire, that is what is known as the first house. And in this style chart, that is always going to be the first house. So if you're starting from the natural zodiac with the natural progression of the zodiac, this would be Aries, and Aries is associated with fire, which is why I have that element there. And then in this chart, you count counterclockwise, and then that would be the second house, third house, fourth. So it'd go, you have fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water. And you have this same, pattern repeated over and over again. So the first thing to understand is with elements, those are a great foundational thing to start to really look at, because everything in our universe is made of a combination of them. Like we're all a mixture of these things. Then you want to understand that the different elements are associated with different genders. So we're bringing in the law of gender here, right? Cosmic law. So air and fire are associated with the masculine. Water and earth are associated with the feminine. They're different expressions of the same gender. So air and fire being masculine, water and earth being feminine. So as you can see here, there's a few things that we can start to look at if we look at this chart. Well, if you're starting with, fire, earth, air, water, well, what's the first thing we can see there? It's masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, this balance back and forth. Just, it's the progression, it's the walk of consciousness, this play between masculine and feminine. When you start to really understand the essence of masculine and feminine, so much in the world becomes clear. And these elements are a great way for explaining it, because it's that you break it down into the different expressions of the same gender, right? So different expressions of the masculine, different expressions of the feminine, and that allows you to see different polarities within that gender. So we see that there. Then you can also look at, if you're looking at the direct reflection of any element in the chart. So if you're looking at fire here in the first house, and then if you go to the bottom, that center box where there's air, that would be the seventh house. Those are both what? Masculine, the masculine gender, but they're different elements, different expressions of that, the different polarities of that. And when you start to really understand what the first house and seventh house are about, the first house is your sense of self. It's your fire. That's why when you see someone and they're kind of down out at you, what's an expression? Oh, they've lost their fire. They're down on themselves, right? So you can see that there. The seventh house is our relationships. It's air. So that's associated with communication and the intellect and connecting with other people. But what happens in our life? Our relationships, will very much feed our sense of self. That air element can feed that fire. If you have a lot of people like really, approving of that sense of self, or giving you love feedback, what's that going to do? That's going to grow that fire, inflate that sense of self. So you can see that this, this play back and forth between the different polarities, and again, the law of polarity. We're talking about cosmic law here and just different expressions. And, understanding elements and seeing how they're set up in the chart are very useful for that. Because what you're keeping in mind, what you're looking at here is just a map of the sky. So you're looking at the physical manifestation of the thought patterns of the mind of the all. And then you're looking at the natural zodiac here and the elements associated with each zodiac sign. So this balance, no matter which sign is in the ascendant, is always there. There's always going to be the pattern of fire, earth, air, water, of masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. It's always present. That perfect balance is always there. It doesn't matter which way you slice this chart, you're going to be able to find all four of those elements. Like with water here, we have, earth on the other side. So both expressions of the feminine. The earth element is the feminine that is steady. It's grounded. It can always be there and be firm and be, a support, right? Like with, you think of women in the family traditionally, that maternal nature, that grandmother, that mother, they're really that kind of person that really brings and binds the whole family together. But then we also look at water. Well, water is associated with the emotions, with movement, with flowing. They're both the feminine, right? But they're at different polarities. One is being able to be solid and move and be firm. The other is being able to flow. With fire and air, you can associate fire with our actions, with taking initiative, moving on things, creating things. With air, it's the thought process, it's the intellect, it's our communication. So when you start seeing how these work together, you can start to observe some interesting lessons. For example, anytime you're wanting to study one placement in the chart, or you're thinking about one element, study its opposite, study the polarity, because that's going to give you the full spectrum of the picture. And I'll give an example of how this can play out. Imagine a person is very stuck in the air element. They're really in their head. They might have a lot of heavy air placements and energy in their chart. So it keeps them in their head. They're always talking about different ideas. They're coming up with brainstorms, and that's great unless you never put it into action. So if you're thinking about things all the time, but you're not actually creating something, how do you balance that back out? Well, you lean into the other polarity of the masculine. You lean into fire. You take action on those thoughts. You take action on those goals. And then when you're using both of those together, that's how you're truly creating with the masculine. The same with the feminine. So if you get, the earth element, one of the maybe downsides to it, if you're in an imbalance with an earth energy within the feminine, is that the feminine can get stuck. You can be stuck in the past. So how can you sometimes get yourself unstuck? Well, lean into water, lean into the motion. You have to care enough to get yourself unstuck. There has to be some kind of an emotional need that you have to go and fulfill, that actually motivates you enough to change whatever circumstance you're in order to get unstuck, in order to create a flow in your life. What happens if a person is too wrapped up in their emotions? They're too watery. Well, lean into the opposite, lean into earth, become more grounded, try to become more stable, look at things from a down to earth perspective, try not to get swept away by all the circumstances. You can see how these work back and forth, but you have to understand each one. And a huge thing for me for understanding the law of gender is really understanding that there are different expressions even of the same gender. Whereas, air and fire, they're both masculine. Like I said, they're just on different sides of the pole. So you start to then observe the law of polarity. And this is a theme with natural law, cosmic law, that you'll see, is that each and every one of these laws are integrated. They're working together. Where you look for one, you'll see the others. If you look for the others, you'll see the one. They're all there. And this is a chart you can study again more and more. I actually have a short little episode on that series that I'll be putting out, that I took this chart from my course that I was teaching. But this is definitely one that you could study and look at quite a bit, and keep observing cosmic law in there. But again, I want to keep it to I want to keep within my time here, so I'll move on from this. So now that we kind of have some basics, we can move into, well, what are areas of focus that we need to look at in the chart? Well, one of the things that we can start, to look at first when we're thinking of a chart is realizing that when you're looking at a chart, essentially what that is you take a person's, if you don't know how to create a chart, there's lots of different free ones that you can do. And again, if you're wanting to use Vedic astrology, it's a different zodiac than the tropical or typical Western astrology. And I don't have time to get into all that in this presentation, but I have other work out there explaining that. But what you're understanding is you're taking, your exact, the place you were born, the time the date you're born, and the exact time you're born, and in order to see where all the planets and the constellations and everything in the sky was in relation to your position on Earth at the moment of your birth. That then you take essentially like a screenshot or a snapshot of that, and then that is the chart, right? But what's really important, and always keep this in the back of your mind, is when you're understanding if everything in the physical reality is a manifestation of the mind of the all, it's a physical manifestation through the law of correspondence. What we're looking at with astrology is we're looking at the physical manifestation of the mind of the all in order to also, through the law of correspondence, look at the energetic frequencies and like what is going on there. So you're observing the thought patterns of the mind and all, and being able to understand all these different energies, all these parts, and then how they come together then allows you to analyze and look at the general overall kind of theme in a situation. So that then applies on the macrocosm of looking at the collective consciousness or just things going on in general, but it also works on the microcosm with you as an individual, because you are a fractal of the consciousness of the mind of the all. And when you came into manifestation, that is the energy that was present when you came here. So that's why it becomes imprinted as a kind of underlying foundational blueprint. So we're starting to look at this as like a map of our life, a map of our consciousness. So then as we become aware of it, we can then choose how to work with that. I'm not a doom and gloom astrologer. I'm not a fatalistic astrologer. I use it to create awareness because awareness creates choice. So if you're wanting to start learning about yourself, where are some areas that you should start focusing at if you go and create a chart and you want to start studying? Well, I have a few here, and keep in mind with astrology, it is so vast. You could study your chart every day for the rest of your life and you would still have more to learn. There's always something new to be unlocked. This is just a very basic scratching the surface where you should kind of start with things and why. And also with the purpose of knowing yourself and then learning to also not only have a better relationship with yourself, but then be able to interact with others in a more healthy way. So if you're wanting to do that, the first place that you're always going to want to look is what is known as the lagna, which means to tighten down in Sanskrit, or it's also translated as the self. This is also known as the ascendant, or in the Western, they'll call it the rising. But this is the zodiac sign that was rising in the east at the moment of your birth. That becomes your ascendant, or your first house. It becomes a huge pillar of your personality. There's really three big pillars of your personality. And in the Western system, they tend to focus on the sun more, but we focus on the lagna, the ascendant, and the moon more in the Vedic system. And the reason for that is that everybody born in the same 30-day period is born under the same sun sign. So yes, that does give you some qualities and some perspective, but it's also still a very kind of a broad period of time. Obviously, all those people born in that same period of time aren't going to be exactly the same, right? There's going to be a lot of differences. Well, the moon, it changes signs every 2.5 days. It's also our mind and our emotions. So that's a little bit narrower of a period of time. But then we have the lagna, the ascendant. Well, that changes every 2 hours. You have 24 hours a day, 12 signs, 2 hours per sign. Okay, so that's a narrower period of time. And in the Vedic system, we also have lunar constellations known as nakshatras and things like that, but I'm not going to get that far into it today. So that's why we start with the lagnas, because it's that narrowest period of time. So it's going to give us the most accurate glimpse of that person as an individual. That's why it becomes one of these pillars. So that lagna is always going to be that first house. So in this North Indian style chart, that's always going to be this big box in the top center here. So in this chart, as the example I have, this person is a Gemini ascendant. So being that they're Gemini Ascendant and it's in their first house, their sense of self, you could see that, this would be your Gemini person. For them, Gemini it's ruled by the planet Mercury, which is our intellect and communication, things like that. And it's associated with the element of air, which is again associated with the intellect, communication, relationships, connecting with people, technology, all these types of things. So for a Gemini person, a huge part of their sense of self is they'll really appreciate the intellect. They'll be able to be left brain people. They'll have a sense of duality to them though, because Gemini is the twins. They're going to enjoy communication, connecting with others, having friendships. They'll enjoy comedy, because Mercury, is a noticed in Young Prince. It's a very kind of fun planet. So Geminis will have that kind of Mercurian quality, that there's also that slight trickster kind of energy there. So they'll probably have a good sense of humor. All those kind of qualities you would see now become a major part of this person. And this is a huge position chart, because from here, everything else is then read in the chart from that ascendant. So really digging into that and understanding those qualities will help you understand a lot about the person. Like the first house is always the truest reflection of a person. And then each of the other houses are different areas of our life. So there's different aspects and energies in our life, and they come together in different combinations. So you have, the energy of the planets that have all their own qualities, the signs, and then the houses are like areas of life. So it's like you're taking the qualities and the tendencies of the planets and the signs, combining those, and then bringing that into different areas of your life, into the different houses, if that makes sense. So the next place we would want to look at would be our moon, because as I mentioned before, our moon is associated with our mind. And this is not our intellect. This is the higher mind, the unified mind. It's also associated with our emotions. The moon is a feminine planet. So here, to identify this person's moon, you would look at on the chart and you can see here MO, that stands for moon. And in different charts, they'll have, different programs will show things different ways. But you can see here that the moon is in the sign of Cancer, and it's sitting in the second house because, as I explained earlier, the center box is always the first house, and then you count counterclockwise. So you start where you're at. So you start in the first house, so 1, and then counterclockwise 2. So that's the second house. And in this North Indian style chart, that will always be the second house. If you go counterclockwise to where Leo is, that's always going to be the third, so on and so forth. So this person has their moon in Cancer in the second house. Well, the second house is known as the house of beliefs, the house of values. So, here we have the person who's, moon, and it's in Cancer. Well, Cancer is a sign that's ruled by the moon. So in Vedic astrology, that's what's known as Mula Trikona. So both the karmas and the qualities of both the moon and that sign of Cancer, which are, very emotional qualities, those kind of things, those really will become very prominent with this person. So they'll be a person that they feel their emotions very deeply. They value those very deeply. They'll probably be a very nurturing person towards others, because Cancer people, especially with that moon there, will want to give to others and nurture others, and they'll care about how other people feel. But they also might be a little bit guarded, just like a crab has a shell to protect all its soft insides. A Cancer person can have an appearance of a shell, but really on the inside, they're very soft. They're a very caring type of person, and again, not all Cancer people are the same, because we also have the lunar constellations known as nakshatras behind that. And each one of those will kind of have a different quality of that Cancer energy that gets brought out. But that's where you start to look at the finer detail. But, this is the first place that you want to start at looking at the planet, if there's any other planets sitting with it, what sign they're sitting in and what house they're sitting in. That's your foundational level that you start assessing things off of. And then you can dive into it deeper from there. So, after you identify where the moon is, you then want to look at where the sun is. So we've looked at, our sense of self, our ascendant. You're looking at your mind and your emotions, and then the sun is associated with your soul on the higher level, but also your ego, right? So we can see that each of these is a different part of ourselves. they're all part of us, but they are slightly different things. So, and when you're looking at each one, you're looking at the different details, the finer details of yourself. So in looking at the sun, we could see that this person's sun is sitting in their 7th house here, the house of relationships, and it's sitting with the planet Mercury, and they're in the sign of Sagittarius. Well, definitely some interesting stuff I can see here. The first thing I would note would be that like Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. So this is the planet is the ruler of the 1st house for this person. And it's in their 7th house of relationships. And Gemini is a sign that is all about relationships. So what you can see here is this theme of the importance of relationships, the importance of communication, of connecting with people on a deeper level, on a soul level, would be really important for this person. They wouldn't want to just connect with anybody for the sake of connecting with them. They'd want to connect with this person on a soul level because their soul, their ego sitting here. It's with Mercury, a planet of communication, and it's in a sign of like Sagittarius, which is all about finding the higher truth. You know, it's a sign that's ruled by Jupiter. So finding that higher truth, finding cosmic law, natural law, what is real and what's practical in order to be able to change my life. So this person would want to connect in relationships that were very practical, that they had a fire to them, because Sagittarius is a fire sign. So there was a spark there. They were relationships that inspired action, those type of things. So you could really see that, you know, that 1st house and the 7th house, again, are reflections of each other. So if you're ever wanting to study one part of the chart, be sure to always look at its opposite. Look at that polarity. Look at you could look at it through polarity. You could look at it as the law of correspondence, in the 1st house, as above, so below in the 7th. So, all these cosmic laws can be observed through observing, the science. And I could go much deeper into each of these, but again, I'm just trying to hit on it very brief, so I stay within my time period. The next little thing that I'm going to look at here are Rahu and K2, which are the nodes of the moon, the north and south node of the moon. So these are not actual planets. They're what are known as shadow planets. So because we can't actually, they're not planets we can see with our visible eye. They work on a unconscious or a subconscious level, right? They're not in the conscious mind, they're in the subconscious and the unconscious mind. But these are 2 mathematical points that are calculated by seeing the place along the solar and lunar ecliptics where they cross on each side of the planet there. Those become the north and south node of the moon. And in Vedic astrology, there's a very rich mythology with these. And I don't have time to get into that because it is a little bit of a longer one. But in short, Rahu represents our desires and what we're pulled towards in life, like the things we really want to achieve. K2 represents kind of our foundational or our formatted programming from early childhood, or things that we're really familiar with. And the way there's always a dance between Rahu and K2. And the way this works out is if you're thinking about Rahu as things you're going after, and K2 is a place that you're familiar with, you're comfortable. When people get, they've been in a place too long, say, they grew up in like a small town or something, they're like, oh, I just can't wait to get out. I just want to get out of here. Well, that feeling is K2. You're familiar with it. You know what's going on. It feels safe, but it can be frustrating if you spend too much time there. And Rahu is that foreign place. It's that new adventure. It's that new desire, that new experience. So there's always this play back and forth between, what we're comfortable with and what our new desires are and where we want to move to. But sometimes if people go out and they're trying to go after a new experience and it may not necessarily go the way they want, well, what do? They fall back on what they're familiar with. And then after a while, they'll get, okay, well, maybe I'm ready to go try this again, or I want to try a different thing. So there's this dance back and forth. And in the chart, Rahu and K2 are always extremely important to look at, because any chart I've ever looked at, they will always play a very prominent role in a theme in someone's life of this energy and this dance back and forth. So not only the signs that are in there or planets that are sitting with them, but the houses, those areas of life that Rahu and K2 are sitting in, you'll see for a person, those are really, really important to them. Very prominent. There's a lot of karmas, a lot of lessons to be experienced and knowledge to be gleaned from those experiences wherever they're sitting with. So in this person, we would see that obviously K2, we can see KE, that's K2, is sitting in the sign of Leo in the third house of communication. And then their Rahu, because K2 and Rahu are always sitting directly opposite of each other. So if, one's in the third house, the other's going to be in the ninth. If one's in the first, the other will be in the seventh. If one's in the fourth, the other will be in the 10th. Always going to be opposite of each other. So this person's Rahu is sitting in the sign of Aquarius. It's all about, creating a better world, being a sovereign individual for yourself and for the rest of humanity, wanting to do, incorporate technology, wanting to create a new age, create a world that's based on cosmic law, natural law, because Aquarius is ruled by the sign of Saturn, which Saturn governs cosmic law, natural law. So if anybody is out there thinking Saturn is a bad thing, it's quite the opposite. That is actually the archetype that you really need to work with most to truly understand cosmic law. So we have it here, and it's in the ninth house, which is of spirituality, of teachers. It's the original home of Sagittarius. So all those Sagittarius type of energies, wanting to find that higher truth, wanting to find, have the arrow hit the target. Sagittarius is the archer. When an archer's taking aim, they're not, it's just not a spray and pray type of technique like you would use with other types, certain types of weaponry. There you have a single shot and you're aiming it very directly and very intentionally. But it's the same thing with Sagittarius. They're trying to find that truth, that what is truth? Where's the bullseye? What's actually practical? So that ninth house deals with this type of energy. So this person, with that Rahu and Aquarius would really then want to have they'd have a strong desire to want to create a better world, to have those, tap into those Aquarian type of experiences, and they would be drawn to the spiritual side of life, of wanting to be, a teacher that is like sharing these type of things. They might even, someone like this might even be like a tech teacher or something like that. That could be one thing you could see. That K2 in Leo would mean like their sense of self. Well, K2 in the mythology is a headless body. So this can kind of be an interesting place for to go into Leo, because Leo is very much as a sign that's associated with the ego, because it's ruled by the sun. So you see these themes that like repeat both through the planet and the sign and the house. There's the same general energy, and there's just different areas it shows up, and then depending on the combination of those, you can see like the same expression expressed in, the same thing expressed in a lot of different ways in a chart. But when you get K2 in Leo, it becomes a person that they don't really tap into that Leo energy, or they're familiar with it. They can have a strong sense of self, but they don't feel stuck there. They're more interested in looking towards the collective, looking towards Aquarius, because that's where Rahu's sitting. So that could definitely be a very interesting thing to analyze here, and that would be a big area, because you could see that play between what the self and society, the self and others. They're reflections of each other. And I could go on and on about this, but again, I'm trying to keep it quick. The next big area you want to look at in a chart are conjunctions. So conjunctions are areas where you have two or more planets all coming together in the same sign in the same house. The reason that is because it's kind of like a melting pot. You're thinking of, or imagine like a chart like your, like a song, right? So to continue with this theme, each of the planets and the signs, they're all just different instruments that they all have kind of their own sound that they do and their own role within the band. Well, if you can see, there's like an area of the song, like an area of life, a house where there's different instruments coming together all together. Well, you could see that would be an area of the song where there'd be more sound concentrated. Well, it's the same thing with like when planets are coming together in conjunction, there's more energy, there's more qualities being brought together there. So then it kind of becomes like you're mixing these together. So you're looking at the qualities of both. In this case, their only conjunction is Sun and Mercury in Sagittarius. So you'd have the fiery quality of the Sun, the air quality of Mercury, of that intellect, that communication, that fiery quality of Sagittarius. You're seeing how these like different, a lot of masculine energy in this kind of thing. So this person would have, and again, back to the basics of gender and things, analyze the masculine and the feminine and things. So that could become a very uh, a very fiery placement in their chart. And it's again in their house of relationships, which obviously our relationships in life are always going to be a big area for us because they're a reflection of ourselves. So anywhere you see a little pileup of planets, that's what's known as a conjunction. And that obviously is going to be important to look at because there's a reason that soul chose to have that karmic experience. And if there's an area of the life where there's a lot of things going on, a lot of karmas and experiences being brought there, it's because there's lessons to be learned there. So that's obviously an area you want to focus on. And then for understanding ourselves, we also need to understand our relationships and how we are with others. So that's that seventh house, which we've talked about a little bit here because this person happened to have their conjunction and sun and stuff in that seventh house. But your house of relationships is always going to be important for you to study. Because what did I mention earlier? If you're ever wanting to study one area of the chart, say the sense of self, study the opposite, study the polarity, your relationships. Looking at your relationships in life and how healthy they are is going to tell you a whole lot about yourself. Well, the same thing applies in the chart and can be observed here. So those are just areas that we want to focus on in the chart. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide here. So I try to stay on time. So the next little interesting thing to observe here is what is known as the Aruda Lagna. So the Aruda Lagna comes from two words, Aruda, which means reflection, and Lagna, as I before, means self. It's that ascendant. So the Aruda Lagna is a reflection of ourself. And to me in Vedic astrology, this is one of the most interesting areas to focus on. So this is kind of based on the concept that as you come here as a soul, there are not only certain things that you want to achieve, certain karmas, experiences you want to have, so you can learn lessons from that and develop as a soul. But there's also a role, a gift that you have to give to others by embodying a certain type of energy, a certain archetype that you naturally have an ability that it's in you. It's part of your sense of self. And as you embody that sense of self, as you embody that role, it really is a gift to others. So by embodying this, you help them out, which then also helps lead to your success. And we all want to be successful in different areas of life. And this doesn't just apply to say like money or business or anything like this. This helps you be successful in your relationships, just in general in life. This is a really good tool for being able to help create that. You could think of it like, imagine you going to a play, someone that, an actor is coming out on stage and they're embodying a certain role, a certain character. Now, that's not them in like real life necessarily. It's a costume that they're putting on, but that's what you're expecting because them, playing that role is then what giving you entertainment, getting to enjoy it in the crowd. Well, in that same kind of way, as we embody our Aruda Lagna, it's kind of us embodying that costume that actually then is a sense of service to others. And this is a concept that you can spend, I'll be teaching an entire course on it and stuff, and you can spend years and years studying on it, but it's something that is great after you've looked at those other things in the chart and you want to start diving deeper. This is a really interesting thing to look at. And, for those who aren't aware, I also do offer like consultations and things like that you can always check out on my website. And this happens to be one of my consultations that I do offer. But I'm going to tell you how to calculate this yourself. That way you can go ahead and start doing that study, for your own. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the chart and you're going to find the ruler of the first house. Okay, so like in our example chart where we had Gemini as the sign that is ruling the first house, the ruler of Gemini is Mercury, which was sitting in the seventh house of that chart. And I'll go back to it here and show as an example. So you find the ruler of the first house. Then from the first house, you count to that ruler. So we would count from Gemini in the first house all the way to the seventh house to where Mercury is. And then you count that same number of places again. So wherever that lands is your Aruda, unless that happens to fall into the first house or seventh house. And then if that's the case, then you count 10 houses from that. So in short, if it was to fall into the first house, that would end up in the 10th house. If it was to fall into the 7th, it would then end up in the 4th. Because as you're counting, remember, you always start from the place that you're at. So let me go back one slide here just to demonstrate here. So in this chart, we can see that we find, the first house and find the ruler of it. So as I said, we have Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you count that number again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So because that landed back in the first house, we would go 10 houses from that. And the 10th house is right over here. So this person's Aruda Lagna would be Jupiter and Pisces in their 10th house of career. So you can see a person obviously being a very spiritual person, someone who's supposed to be a teacher, teach about deep emotional things. And that's very reflective. If you look at that Rahu in Aquarius and that Mercury, Sun in Sagittarius, Venus in Scorpio, they have a lot of placements that would really indicate a person that would have a lot of discipline as a spiritual teacher. They'd be a very intelligent person, a very good orator, and they'd be able to communicate those type of things. So that's how you would calculate that. So now say if it was like something different, like the planet landed in like the 5th house. So you would go to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you would count again, and then you would end up in the 9th house if this was like a different chart, just as an example. So find the ruler, count to it, then count to that number again. And that's going to allow you to calculate your Aruda. And again, as you start to study this archetype, that's how you want to think of it, as an archetype or a costume. You look at the energy, and then as you can start to tap into that area of yourself, because it's in your chart, it's part of you. As you start to tap into that and learn to embody that, you'll notice people respond to you better and better. And it's something that, again, it takes years of really studying to develop and get to going, but it is a good place to look. The next little area I want to focus on is, if we've looked at astrology for learning more about ourselves, it's the blueprint, it's the roadmap for understanding how we operate as an individual. The other way we can then apply that in our life is by using it in our relationships. Just like I said, with that first house and 7th house, ourself and our relationships, they're reflections of each other. So by using it in your relationships, not only do you learn more about the people you're forming those relationships with, you learn more about yourself. So again, it allows us to not only create more self-awareness, but awareness of others. So, when we're dealing with people, we can look at them as an individual, like how they really are on a soul level, on an energetic level. You can start to see all their dispositions and the lessons and the karmas and things that they're going through as a soul, and see them on that level. And it kind of allows you to step back and have a bigger perspective and not get so caught up in the little things, or at least that's what I found in my experience. Another benefit is, again, when we start to learn, when we start to understand more about people in our lives that are important to us, we learn more about ourselves. Whether that's your spouse or your children or your friends, your business partners, whatever the relationship is, those are all reflections of you. And in each one of those, there's many, many lessons contained that can teach you more about yourself as well as others. It's a twofold thing. This is where we see that law of correspondence, as within, so without. Bringing it back to cosmic law. Always keep that in mind when you're studying astrology. That's the foundational, that's the base, the first thought you should always have in your mind is that what I'm looking at is I'm studying cosmic law. Start looking at it through that lens when you're understanding things, and you will pull so much more from it. Another really good reason why astrology benefits our relationships is that it's an act of respect to learn another person's chart. And when we act from a place of respect, we're building our relationships based on that. And what is respect? Well, it comes from the Latin re and then spectare. It means to look again. So when you're taking the time to actually not only look at your own chart, that's an act of self-respect, to take the time to learn more about yourself in that kind of an intimate way, but to look at someone else's in that kind of an intimate way, and to keep coming back to it, and to keep looking at it, and to keep looking at learning more and looking at it from different perspectives. That is an act of respect every time, because every single time you are reflecting on that more. And the more you reflect on yourself and the more you reflect on your relationships, the more awareness you're going to have. And awareness creates choice. So then you can choose to continue to embody relationships that become more and more healthy. Another really useful thing here is, as I was saying, when you look at someone very intimately, what you're looking at is someone's soul. You're really looking at their energetic body. You're understanding their karmic lessons and experiences that they want to have. You're looking at their dispositions. And by doing that, that helps you have acceptance of a person. Just because a person wants to have different experiences than you, or, they're more of an extroverted person, you're more of an introverted person, that doesn't mean that their karmic lessons or goals are any less than yours, just like yours aren't any less than theirs. So when you see that we're all souls on our journey, we're all on our path, you can see where someone's path is. And that, like, okay, so they have a slightly different path than me, and you can respect their right to be on that. So long as, again, they're not then going and violating others and things, right? Obviously, we don't tolerate someone doing wrongdoing, but again, applying this in our personal relationships and things, for example, like with my child as a father, astrology is such a useful tool for me as a father, is that if one of my kids is doing something, certain behavior that I'll just notice in their chart, rather than thinking of it of like, oh, they're doing this bad thing, I could, if there's maybe some kind of an issue, I can look at it like, oh, okay, so this is a karmic lesson. They were meant to have an experience like this so they can learn this certain type of lesson. And you can't go learn those lessons unless you have that experience. So that allows me to respect them as soul, just as equal as mine, that has just of important lessons to learn. And just because those might be slightly different than mine doesn't make them any less important. And that applies to whether it's your children or your spouse or anyone else in your life. Another really useful thing is with astrology, you can get into what's known as like relationship astrology, or like synastry astrology. So you can take different people's charts, and then by observing where planets and things line up, those are what are known as synastry points. So say if one person has like their Mars and Venus in Scorpio, and another person has like their Saturn in Scorpio, well, that would then become a synastry point. So when you're seeing how in that relationship, it's like each person kind of has their own flavor, their own qualities, right? And then when you're bringing those together, well, all those energies, all those qualities and things are then coming together. So if you kind of want to look at the overall theme of the relationship, or areas of the relationship that are going to be important, that there's going to be karmic connection points in, this is where these synastry points come into play. And these are extremely useful for looking at an understanding of relationship. And this one point alone is a huge subject that I could teach a course that's days and days long on just this one thing of using astrology and relationships. And I also offer consultations for things like that. But this can be applied in your friendships, as a parent, with your spouse, in your business relationship, because any person you interact with, there's going to be some kind of synastry, some kind of energetic or karmic overlap. And that is why you as souls are coming together to have that experience. So this is like, what you're doing is you're looking at the roadmap of each individual, and then what happens when those come together. It's a very, very useful thing to be able to build your relationships. A very useful tool. So those are some ways that astrology can very much benefit our relationships. So to try to keep in time here, because I do think I already went over, but just a quick summary of everything. So again, this is just scratching the surface of astrology. I was just trying to give a general overview, because to go into any kind of a detail, an hour is just not enough time. There's just not really any kind of way to do it, because it's such a massive subject. So again, That's why I made that playlist called Vedic Astrology and Cosmic Law. Please check that out on my YouTube channel, because that will give you a lot more information to go along with this presentation so you can get more out of it. But the first little, summary point here is that awareness creates choice. And, for those who have watched, if you watch that little segment that I did for my course on Cosmic Law, I consider that statement a cosmic law just as much as any of the 7 Hermetic principles. Awareness creates choice. You have knowledge and free will, the fundamental building blocks of our universe. Everything that is going on that we're experiencing can be summed up in that. Awareness creates choice. And this is why knowledge of cosmic law, of natural law, is so important, because then you have the choice to exercise your free will. And this science of astrology helps create, it brings more awareness. So then we have more choice, both with how we interact with ourselves as an individual, with our relationship with ourselves, but relationships with others. When we're using astrology to learn more about ourselves and others, it is an act of respect. Again, that's so important, to take that time to have self-respect and respect for others. Because when you take the time to reflect on others, you're a lot less likely to be seeing them as something less than you, to be violating their rights. A world of freedom is built on both first self-respect and respect of others. You have to have it twofold. Again, that law of correspondence coming in. When observing astrology, you're observing the physical manifestation and the thought patterns of the mind of the all. And though you're looking at one person's chart, yes, you're looking at them as an individual, but remember, they're a fractal of the mind of the all. That they were just one little fractal of all that energy being manifested that you could use. You could go to any kind of a historic event, create a chart from that, and be able to look at what was kind of going on energetically more on a macrocosm kind of perspective. Just like you can take it all the way down to the microcosm at the level of individual. It is a science that can be used to understand everything. It's the study of the law of correspondence, as above, so below. You're using the sky to study the inside of the individual, using the outer world to study the inner, and the inner to study the outer, because they are reflections of each other. So really look at that. Like when you think of a chart, it's not just a chart. You're looking at like a little snapshot of like a moment in the mind of the all, and then being able to analyze that. And the last little thing is to remember that, you can create senseless noise, or you can become a conscious creator. And astrology is just a tool that helps us play in the band, to where we can consciously create something that is beautiful, something that a world that we all want to listen to, versus, a lot of the senseless noise that, we will see that people have if they don't actually have the fundamental knowledge of how to step into a role as a conscious creator. So that's go to summarize my presentation for the conference. So again, definitely want to thank Brandon and everybody at the Cubbyhole Network for having me do this. I want to thank you guys for taking your time and your attention to pay to learn this. And if you want to learn more, if this is something that interests you, you can go to thewizardfactory.com, check out the website where I have all my consultations I offer, courses that I teach, or you can also visit, be sure to check out the Wizard Factory YouTube channel. We have a lot of great information on there about different subjects, obviously not just Vedic astrology. We expand much beyond that, but this is kind of my little niche and my passion. And check out that playlist, because I did create this presentation to go along with that. So you'll get a lot more from it by being able to also take in that information. That's going to wrap everything up. So thank you again, everybody. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Enjoy listening to the rest of the amazing speakers.